Talking to a friend the other day, just got back from Mexico, and my first question was, were you guys okay? They went down to one of the all-inclusives, but I hear so many stories anymore about just how dangerous it is once you get outside of those resorts. But they're not even, some of the drug cartels aren't even shying away from our military bases. 18 people killed the other day in an attack outside of a military base, and it's all about drugs and guns. And then we had someone call in the other day and say, man, it's just a nonstop pipeline up Interstate 44 from Mexico all the way through the west, through Middle America, and on out to the East Coast. So I thought we'd check in again with our good friend Rick Rosenfeld over at UMSL. He joins us here on The Mindset. Rick, good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you, John.
Okay, the story I just told, I think, is what most people think of Mexico right now. You've studied this for a long time. What's the reality? Is it just lawlessness across the board down there because of these drug cartels, or what's the true story?
Mexico has critically high crime rates, and some of that obviously is related to the drug trade. But with respect to the crimes that tourists, including American tourists, should watch out for, not much of that is directly related to the drug trade. Something like 90% of all the victims, homicide victims in drug-related violence in Mexico are members of the drug cartels themselves. And then a large fraction of the remainder are Mexican officials of one kind or another.
So, it almost sounds like the same situations we deal with here in St. Louis.
Correct.
You hear about all these homicides. Well, it's gang on gang, drug on drug,
right.
And people don't go to the neighborhoods where that happens. Same
Correct.
situation
but I don't
there.
want to minimize the risk that tourists, including American tourists, do face. It's not necessarily from the drug-related violence. It's from the overall level of high crime in Mexico. And I'm talking about everything from street robbery to extortion by local corrupt police officials and other officials, so-called taxicab robberies, and pickpocketing. That sort of crime does pose a risk to tourists. It's not at a level at which the State Department is telling people not to go, but the State Department does continue to caution Americans and others who do go to Mexico to be careful.
So is it just a best-case scenario that you find, if you want to go to Mexico to vacation this summer, you find like an all-inclusive, go there and stay there? Is that the best case?
Well, what can I tell you? That's what I do.
And you're the guy who studies it, so I trust you.
Although we are planning, I really do enjoy being in Mexico, and we are planning a trip in which we will not be in an all-inclusive. We're going to rent a house. And so if anything happens, I'll let you know, John.
Or we'll read about it in the news.
Let's hope not.
Yeah, exactly. What about, when people hear, there's violence in Mexico, is it primarily along the border, or is it all over the place? I mean, are there certain cities like in Acapulco or Mexico City where it's better than others, or what's the general thought?
The Baja area is an area that has, in recent years, seen an increase in violence, including drug-related violence. It's not necessarily along the border, though there are places, Juarez being a very good example, where the drug wars have clearly entered. But no, the violence that we're talking about, both drug-related and other, is concentrated in various parts of Mexico, but it's not evenly spread across the country, nor is it evenly spread in, the largest city, Mexico City. There's some neighborhoods in Mexico City that are very risky and others that are not. Not evenly spread, not necessarily along the border, though there are places along the border that are quite dangerous.
I don't know if you've ever studied this, Rick, but we hear the stories all the time about I-44 being this big drug corridor. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if we hear that so often. I mean, because we live right here, and so when there's a bust, we all hear about it. Yeah. Is it really that big of a corridor between Mexico and the East Coast, or is it just, it really is?
It is an important corridor into the Midwest, but, there are other, were we talking in New Jersey, we'd be talking about I-90 as a major drug corridor, So it depends on where you are, but in this part of the country, 44 is a major supply route.
I always wonder how the Highway Patrol just happens to pull over the one car that's missing one license plate, and lo and behold, there's all these drugs. Do you think they track them all the way across and then, hey, here's your opportunity, jump on them now?
I don't think so. I think it's more fortuitous than that. I mean, there are operations to track people coming up along the roadways, but no, I think it's mainly fortuitous. And good police officers watch out for signs, and they're the first to admit they miss most, but they do pick up quite a bit.
It just seems so ironic that they pull over a tractor trailer that had a headlight out.
Yeah.
And then, okay, the tractor trailer's full of pot. That always just seemed a little unusual to me.
Yeah.
Hey, and producer Kyle tells me you were doing a drug study in Amsterdam.
Correct.
That seems
correct.
There's a lot of irony in that, Rick.
Yeah. Well, in some ways, Amsterdam is an ideal location to study drug markets.
I guess so.
We're studying the marijuana markets, and as you and your listeners probably know, marijuana is semi-legal, I think is one way of putting it, in Amsterdam. It's available retail, though interestingly, the retail outlets in Amsterdam are prohibited from purchasing the marijuana that they are permitted to sell out the front door.
Wait, say that again. You lost me on that one.
If you're a retail, if you own one of the coffee shops in Amsterdam, and that's what the marijuana retail outlets are called, it's perfectly permissible for you under regulation to sell marijuana to people coming in the door in regulated amounts. But it is illegal for you to purchase marijuana. Now, the Amsterdam system is this strange and interesting mix of legal, semi-legal, and illegal policies, and what we're finding is that the coffee shops in Amsterdam remain on their toes and are pretty careful in keeping order in the shops and keeping crime away from the shops, precisely because at any moment the government could come down on them.
Well, we always hear, especially from the drug culture, that, wow, just look at Amsterdam. It supports the tax base. There's, you've gotten rid of the illegal aspect of it, so it's not a problem. Is that true or not?
Well, it's true to some extent with respect to marijuana. Of course, what we haven't talked about are the health issues associated with the marijuana abuse. But in terms of the collateral crime, yeah, that is true. But recall, Amsterdam continues to criminalize and very heavily penalize hard drug sales, so-called street drug sales, and we're also studying those markets there. Amsterdam is the exception with respect to the retail purchase of marijuana.
Interesting study. All right, Rick. Hey, good to talk to you once again. Thanks for your time today.
All right, John.
All right,
Bye-bye.
Rick Rosenfeld over at the University of Missouri, St. Louis.